Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you once again for joining us on the 2016 Ultimate Leadership Development Series. And today, I think we have a really great presentation for you. Recently, I was talking to one of my clients, and he had some concerns about his sales force and their ability to give good presentations. And we had a discussion about how to prepare his sales staff to give those good presentations. And I listed to him 5 of the most common presentation mistakes. And one of the things that I wanted to bring you today was that lesson. So if you're in a position that you give presentations regularly, are you making these common presentation errors? And I think that this is really going to be a great presentation. I'm your host, Chris Cebollero, and again, it's just an honor when you guys come and join us for some leadership development, and I want to thank you for letting us join you on your leadership journey. Well, let's go ahead and look at our objectives for this course. The first thing that we're going to talk about is we're going to discuss the importance of knowing your audience. Why do you need to know your audience to give a great presentation? The next thing we'll talk about is you'll be able to list the components of an outline. If you're not developing an extemporaneous outline for your presentation, how are you preparing effectively? Then we're going to define ways to give a dynamic presentation. One of the things that I'll share with you is when you give a presentation, it's like giving a show. You're on stage, and we'll discuss that in depth. And then finally, we're going to explain how preparation decreases stage fright. But as we begin, let's go ahead and look at mistake number 1, not knowing your audience. And why is this important to know? Well, when we think about giving a presentation, are you giving a presentation for yourself? Are you the reason why you're there? Or are you there to ensure that your audience is going to get the information that they're going to need? You have to remember, knowing who your audience is going to be is going to help you prepare so you don't bore them as you now give your presentation. If you're giving a presentation that you think is going to be important, is that you think is going to be entertaining, as that you think is going to be informative, and you don't take your audience into account, you are certainly running the risk that you're going to bore them and you're going to lose them very, very quickly. So the things that you need to consider first is, who are they? Why are you coming into their organization? Why are you coming into their event? Why is it that you have the opportunity to stand in front of them and give them the information that you have? Who are they? What are their age? What's their position? What's their knowledge? You know, I give the same presentations all the time. And sometimes I give those to chief executive officers. Sometimes I give them to frontline supervisors. Sometimes I've gone in and given them to students in high school, and I've given the same presentation. But now what I've had to do is I've had to tailor the message to the audience that I'm giving that presentation to. Another thing to think about is, what are their expectations and motivations for being there? That's something that you need to take into account. What is it that they expect to learn from you? Are they there because they want to be there to increase their knowledge, or are they there because they've been told that you better be at this presentation come Friday? This is going to be important as you now start to think about the developing of the building blocks of your presentation. The other thing that you need to take into account is your presentation is not a one-size-fits-all presentation. You need to be able to show the audience how your presentation is going to affect them. What are the components that they now need to put into practice? You have to remember, as you stand in front of a group, you're there either to inform, to persuade, or to entertain them. So what are the messages? What are the lessons? What are those chunks of information that they need to take out of your presentation and put into their practice? As you now think about how this presentation is going to affect them, that's going to help you guide what building blocks they need to take out of your presentation. You know, when we think about giving a good presentation, if we do not take our audience into account, we're going to miss that mark. It's important that we don't bore them. It's important that we give them the tools that they need from our talk that's going to help them be successful. One of the things that you need to think about is, as people go to conferences, as people have speakers come into their organizations, what is their motivation for being there? Regardless of their motivation, you still need to be able to touch them in a way that they take some piece of morsel, that they take some piece of experience, that they take some piece of information out of your lecture and now use it in their everyday. I certainly advise you to sit down, spend some time, and think about that audience. Have a discussion with the organizer of the conference, the person that's bringing you into their organization, the person that's bringing you into their department, and ask them, what messages do you want your audience to get out of you being there? Mistake number 2 is failing to know the topic that you're giving your talk on. One of the things that I think is the biggest failure is we rely too much on PowerPoint. I'm going to go ahead and give you a little tip here. We're going to talk about the misuse of PowerPoint later in this presentation. But you certainly need to know what the topic is that you're going to be giving. You're standing in front of them. What gives you the right to say, I'm an expert in this topic, and I'm going to be able to teach you a little something about leadership development, or I'm going to be able to teach you a little something about cardiology, or I'm going to be able to teach you a little something about how to close that deal. You really need to become friends with your topic. You need to be able to understand it. You need to be able to debate both sides of the good and the bad, the pros and the cons. And regardless of what side of the topic that you're on, let's say you're pro a topic, you need to be able to understand that con side of it as well, so you're able to be positive in a debate, because there are going to be people that you're going to talk to that aren't going to believe the same things that you're going to believe. They're going to have the alternate side of that discussion. So knowing both sides of that conversation, knowing both sides of that argument is really, really important. I got to tell you, when you stand in front of an audience, that's not the time to be clueless. That is not an excuse. So as you now put yourself in a position that you're going to be a speaker, as you now put yourself into a position that you're now going to be an authority, you've got to know the topic that you're giving. And the way that you're going to do that is you're just going to prepare. As we talk about your audience and knowing what your audience is expecting from you, and knowing now how you need to motivate your audience, what is it that they need to know? And this is where that soul searching comes in. This is where that brainstorming comes in. This is where the opportunity for you to determine how you're going to give that message is going to be the most important. And the way that you're going to need to do that is you need to prepare for that presentation, regardless of how many times you've given the same presentation. Now, I got to tell you, I've got presentations that I've given over 100 times, but I still look at that presentation and still prepare to give it to the audience that I'm going to be standing in front of. And that's going to take us now to rule number 3, and that's failing to prepare. Just because you have great knowledge about a topic, or like I've just said, just because you've given that topic 100 times in the past doesn't mean that you don't need to prepare for that presentation. And what's the best way to prepare? We need to develop an outline. Now, what are the components that make up a great presentation? Well, first off, you need to come up with an attention step. Because you guys know as well as I do. I mean, usually before you give a presentation, people are talking, people are interacting, people are shaking hands, people are happy to see one another. So getting their attention is going to be important. Think about a little joke, something that's going to be non-offensive to the people that are in the audience, or a humorous anecdote, whatever it is, but get their attention somehow. Next thing you want to do is you want to give them a motivation step. Why is it important for them to listen to what you have to say today? Today we're going to go ahead and talk about exceeding expectations. And one of the things that you're going to get out of this is you're now going to be able to have a plan of how you walk into an organization, or how you walk into a department, or how you meet a client, and now you're able to close that deal. There's a motivation step right there. Now, when you think about your audience, you're thinking about the motivation as to why they need to listen to you. Now, with that, you need to give your introduction. Who are you? Why do you have the right to stand in front of these people and give this lecture? Here I am talking to you about the 5 most common presentation mistakes. I've been giving presentations since 1986. I received my instructor certification when I was in the United States Air Force. I had to go to 6 weeks of instructor school, and I had to learn the ins and outs of giving a good presentation. And then from there, I've taught thousands of hours of lecture, of classes. I've been able to inform. I've been able to entertain. I've been able to persuade. I'm an author. I'm a leadership consultant. So now, as you think about your introduction, this is where you start to build your credibility. This is where people need to know why you have the right to stand in front of them and give them your presentation. Now, one of the things to think about is initially, you don't need to develop the attention step, the motivation step, and your introduction right when you start to prepare your presentation. I would advise you to begin with the body of your lecture. And what is it that you want to teach them? What is it that you want to give them? And when you set out the body of your presentation, you should have 1, 2, or 3 main points. Depending on the time that you have to give, maybe you're given a 90-minute presentation. Maybe you're given a 120-minute presentation. What you need to do is determine how many main points that you can give to meet your time frame. Now, one of the things to think about, as you create a main point, you want to be able to give 1 or 2 or 3 subpoints under that main point as well. So as we now talk about our main point, what are the points now that come under that you're able to qualify that main point, that you're able to give substance to it, that you're able to give, a bite to that? And one of the things that you want to be able to do is now you repeat this as you go to your next main point. Again, depending on your time, is depending on how many main points that you're going to give. And usually in an hour presentation, you want to try to give about 3 main points, and then you want to be able to use that math as you start to get into hours, 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour. But you want to be able to have 2 or 3 subpoints per main point. And again, that's going to depend on how much time you have to give your presentation. After you've given your main points, now you want to get into your summary. What we've talked about today is this. This is just a very, very brief summation of your main points and subpoints as now you get into the closing. And then finally, what you want to end with is you want to end with your remotivation. What is it again that you want to let them know the reason that they were in this class is what this is going to do for you? Remember what we talked about today, ladies and gentlemen, and you will never be in a position that you will not exceed expectations again. And then you're kind of wrapping it all up. So one of the things that we need to think about now is, what is the best way to prepare? We need to be able to make certain that as we step on that stage, and now as we start to impart our knowledge, that we're going to be able to be entertaining. We're going to be able to be dynamic. We're going to be able to give a presentation that people are now going to be able to say, that was an outstanding presentation. Now, depending on where you are in your speaker skills, maybe you're an advanced speaker, maybe you're intermediate, maybe you're just beginning. The lack of preparation is what is going to tell when you step in front of people and start to give your knowledge and start to impart that information. You need to be able to make certain that your preparation is something that is going to allow you to be successful. When you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. And that is something that you need to take with you. So, one of the things that I always talk to people about is they're preparing for a presentation that may be 10 weeks away. I got to tell you, on my calendar, I have presentations that I'm scheduled to give a year from today. But does that mean I don't have to think about that presentation until, 1 month before the presentation? I'm going to probably start preparing about 3 to 4 months for that presentation, because as I prepare today, that's going to make certain that I'm able to give that presentation 12 or 16 weeks from now. The next thing that you need to do is you need to gather your data. This is something that's very, very important, especially if this is a lecture that you've given multiple times. Just because you created this lecture and it's a successful lecture doesn't mean that the information that you're going to give is still current. Is there any new research now that has just come out that needs to be changed? Is there any information that you need to take out of it because it's now become obsolete? Those are the things that you need to think about. And you need to be able to prepare to gather data, whether it's the same or new data, to make your presentation dynamic, to make it energetic, to make it the best message that it can be. Once you've gathered your data, now you need to organize your thoughts. This is where you put your ideas down on paper to say, okay, what is my main point? And then what do I want to use to substantiate those points under the main point? Once you're done with that, now comes time to practice. And this is where you need to talk your presentation out. This is where you need to take time to mentally and verbally prepare for giving your presentation. And here we got a picture of a guy standing in front of a mirror. Do I suggest you stand in front of a mirror? There's no reason to look at yourself. You may want to record yourself using a recording device. You may want to video yourself to see your presentation skills and how you're coming across to the audience. But talk this out regularly. Maybe you can give the presentation to your family. Maybe you can give the presentation to your peers. And now you want to be able to say, how do I polish this message so the audience gets the very best out of this presentation? Because remember, the end result is What is the takeaway that you want your audience to have when you're done with your presentation? You know, one of the big things I think that people are fearful of is that they're going to be asked questions that they don't know the answer to. I'm going to tell you right now, there have been many times that I've been asked a question in my speaking career and I did not know the answer. They were great questions and I would just go ahead and say, you know what, that's an excellent question. I don't have the answer to it, but let me get back to you. You are not expected to know the answer to every single question. A couple things that you can do is you could turn around and say, that's an excellent question and I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to it. Does anybody in the audience know the answer to that question? You know, maybe you find someone that has the answer, maybe you don't. But if you say that I'm going to get back to you and I'm going to get the answer for you, make sure you do that, because that's going to affect your future credibility if you don't get back to those people with that answer. You know, so when you anticipate the questions, you can say, I know that they're probably going to ask this question at this particular point in time. I give presentations and the same questions come up every single time at the specific point in that respective presentation. Now, I could very easily answer the question as I'm talking to the audience, but I like the question. I like people to ask the question. If they don't, I go ahead and interject the question. Some of the other things that I've done is I've prepared questions for the audience as well. So I've passed out little 3x5 cards with questions on them that people can interject those questions during the presentation, and I know that they're going to be coming. But don't be fearful if you don't know the answer to the question. You know, one of the great quotes I think comes from Winston Churchill that says, preparation is, if not the key to genius, then at least it's the key to sounding like a genius. And this is what's very, very important. You know, I'm going to go ahead and give you a pearl of wisdom at the end of this presentation. And that pearl is going to be how to prepare yourself to minimize stage fright. But preparation is going to be the key. This is what unlocks your ability to not be as fearful as you would be if you didn't prepare effectively. Let's go ahead and talk about mistake number 4, and that's relying heavily on PowerPoint. And I got to tell you, when PowerPoint came on the market, I remember this being a great tool that was going to be able to revolutionize how we were given presentations. I became an instructor back in 1986. And then we were using slide decks, and we were using transparency, and we were using the overhead projector. For you guys that are new presenters, these may be modes of media that you've never heard of before. But when PowerPoint came on, I said, this is going to be a game changer. But what happened is now the instructor relies too heavily on PowerPoint, and they're not the visual aid. They're letting the PowerPoint presentation be their visual aid. They're letting the PowerPoint presentation tell their story. And PowerPoint should be an addition to you being the visual aid. You're the reason that they're there. You're the person that they want to come listen to. If they can read a presentation on the screen, why do you need to be there? And one of the main mistakes of PowerPoint is excessive text. I mean, there are too many words per line. If you can read the presentation, why do you need to have a speaker? Don't use the PowerPoint as a script for your presentation. This should only be a visual aid. Now, I just went ahead and said the same thing that was up on the screen. Do I need to be there to read it to you, or is it something that you can read yourself? So when you think about using text, you don't want it to be excessive, and you don't want it to be verbatim of what you're going to be talking about. Another challenge with PowerPoint is people use some weird fonts. You have poor font choices, and this is another challenge. I mean, is that something that you could read? Is that something that you can understand? When you give a presentation, make sure that you select a font that could be easily read and it's not very overpowering. So what's the rule of thumb here? The rule of thumb is when you develop a PowerPoint presentation, it should be 3 to 5 lines per slide, no more than 3 to 5 words per line. And if we go back to the slide that I used to say that you should know your audience, look at what we have here. I've got 5 lines there, and I've got no more than 5 words per line. This is easy to understand, and we're not going to overpower the audience. So when you think about PowerPoint, PowerPoint shouldn't be your crutch. PowerPoint shouldn't be your script for giving a good presentation. What you want to do is you want this to be an additional, visual aid to you as the presenter. You want to be able to use it for a graph. You want to be able to use it as a statistic. You want to be able to use it maybe as a memory marker to say, oh, that's right. At this slide, I want to be able to talk about why exceeding expectations and the motivation of the audience is important. And use this now as something that they can see, but that you could use as a memory jog to say, oh, I need to talk about this point at this particular point in time in the presentation. Another thing is, don't read the slides. A lot of times I've seen presenters turn their back to the audience and read the PowerPoint. Now what you're doing isn't giving a presentation, you're telling a story. And really, they're there to see you. You want to be able to be the visual aid, use PowerPoint as an adjunct to your presentation and not as the primary focus of your presentation. Mistake number 5 is giving a boring presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, have we been in those presentations where we're saying, what is going on? What are they talking about? This guy is so monotone, he's going to put us to sleep. We need to think about that when we give a presentation, this is a show. When we give a presentation, we need to give the very best that we give. Now, when I do my leadership development classes, people are paying their hard-earned money to come and listen to me teach them something. They want to get their money's worth. They want to be entertained. They want to be informed. They want to be persuaded. They want to leave there saying that was money well spent. And you can't do that if you're going to give a boring presentation, if you're going to be monotone, if you're going to lack that energy and lack being dynamic in your presentation skills. Another thing that you need to do is you need to be able to look professional. When you give a presentation, your credibility is front and center, and you need to make sure that the way you look is going to enhance your credibility. Because the end result is we want to be able to give a good presentation that doesn't put people to sleep and that doesn't bore them. It's up to us now to make certain that the message that we give is going to be something that the audience can take away and implement in their departments, implement in their organizations, implement with their staff. And this is what's going to be very important. So how do we give a dynamic presentation? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we don't have poor delivery. One of the main things that you hear all the time is, that was a boring speaker. They were so monotone. They had no voice inflection. There was no excitement in their voice. One of the things that you need to think about is, how important is this message to you that you want to share with that audience? One of the things to think about is, when you believe in the message, when this message comes from your heart, this is going to affect how you're given this message. Are there subjects that you're more passionate about than others? If you're going to talk about the 2016 presidential campaign, is this something that you're passionate about, or is it something that you couldn't care less about? There are people who talk about their presidential candidates and you can feel their passion. Now, you may think that the message is wrong. You still feel that passion in their message. And if you have passion for the message that you're giving, this is going to come across in your tone. Another thing that we need to think about is the words that we use to deliver the message. We don't want to use jargon. We don't want to use industry terms. We don't want to use acronyms. If we need to use an acronym, go ahead and define the acronym for people who don't know what that means. But never assume that people understand the words that you're going to be saying. And that's why you need to be able to choose your words as carefully as you can, and you need to be able to have passion with those words to make sure that people can feel your message. Not that they're just hearing it, but people can feel your message as well. And one of the ways that you do that is you have good eye contact with people. Now, the smaller the group, the easier it is to make eye contact. If you have a bigger group, can you make eye contact with 1,000 people in the audience? And now that becomes a little bit more difficult. But you can use room thirds. You can scan the room in thirds and make contact with an area within the room. Or you could just go ahead and scan and pan across the listeners and kind of stop at 1 or 2 people along the way to make that eye contact. People are going to feel that you're talking to them, and that's what's going to be important for delivering a great presentation as well. Another great thing when you're given a good presentation is make sure that your nonverbal communication is heightening your verbal message. And you want to be able to use hand gestures. You want to be able to make certain that the verbal message that you're giving is assisted by your nonverbal communications. This is what's really moving the audience into the position to say, this is something that I need to know. So if you're standing there and you're monotone and your hands are by your sides and you're just standing there with maybe a slouched posture on the stage, what message are they going to take away from that presentation? So you want to be able to make certain that you have good hand gestures, that you have good movement around the stage. Another thing is, don't stand behind a lectern. If there's a lectern there, get out from behind it and have more of a conversation with the audience, but allow yourself to be dynamic. Allow yourself to be energetic. Allow that passion that you have for this topic to come out, and you're going to have a great presentation. So those are the 5 most common mistakes that we make as presenters. But anytime that I talk about presentation skills, one of the things that I always like to talk about is controlling stage fright. Now, stage fright is one of those things that really hinder us and worry us when it comes to giving a presentation. And the more that we worry about the presentation, the more we're going to be worried about giving that presentation. And we think, you know what? We've got tons of time. We've got 12 weeks before this presentation. We're able to prepare. We're going to get ready. But the more and more time passes and the closer and closer you get to giving that presentation, now you start to feel the butterflies in your stomach. Now your hands start to sweat. Now you start to worry about not knowing what you're going to be talking about. And it's important that you now understand the message and the presentation that you want to give. Know your presentation forward and backwards. One of the great things about knowing your presentation is you want to be able to have a solid introduction, because a lot of times people have stage fright in those first 5 minutes of giving their presentation. Once you get into the presentation, and once you now start to get into the main points and the subpoints, people feel a lot more comfortable. But you've got to be able to make certain that you have a solid introduction, because once you get past that first 3 to 5 minutes and get into the substance of your presentation, you're going to have a good presentation. So the things that we want to do is we want to make sure that we practice out loud. We want to be able to make certain that we are not put in a position that we are going to fail giving this presentation. And you got to remember this. Your audience is there to listen to you. They want you to have a good presentation, not only for yourself, but they don't want to be bored by the next 60 or 90 or 120 minutes by someone who is going to give them a boring presentation. So your audience wants you to be successful. So how do we get around stage fright? Well, the first thing you want to do is you want to mentally prepare yourself. Think about the presentation. Picture yourself being on that stage. Picture yourself being in front of that audience, and the points that you're going to deliver, and the subpoints that you're going to deliver. Picture yourself giving this presentation over and over again. Another thing to prepare yourself is make sure on the day of the presentation, you don't hyperventilate yourself. There have been times where I have gone up to speakers who are opening for me, and they've been nervous and they've been concerned, and they're hyperventilating a little bit. And I've had to spend time with them, and I've talked to them to say, you know what, be calm. Take your deep breaths. Go ahead and tell me what your introduction is. How are you going to engage this audience? And we talk together, and now they start to feel a little bit more comfortable. But really the secret is you need to be able to prepare. You need to be able to think about your message. One of the things that you need to forget about is you need to forget about you. This is not about you. This is about the message, and this is about the audience. And a lot of times we think about, well, what if I do this? And what if I do that? And what if I... It's not about the what ifs. It's about you giving your message to the audience and them taking some of that wisdom away from them so they can put it into practice. And one of the things to think about is don't think about how you're going to say things. Don't think about how you're going to transition from your main points to your subpoints. Just think about the message and allow it to happen naturally. If you're thinking about doing something verbatim, or if you're thinking about doing something from a script, or if you're thinking about doing something from memorization, that's where those challenges may lie. What you want to be able to do is know, I want to talk about exceeding expectations. I want to talk about developing your leadership legacy. I want to talk about communication skills. It's not about how you deliver the words, it's what message that you want to get across. Now think about it. I'm going to talk about communication skills. What's the most important component of your communication skills? And I got to tell you, that's probably our listening skills. Well, that was an element that I just took out of one of my presentations, and it wasn't about the words that I wanted to give you. It was about the message that I wanted to talk about, that your listening skills are the most important of your communication skills. So the things that we need to think about is to prepare ourselves for stage fright is to ensure that we're prepared. And I got to tell you, one of the best things that you can do to make certain that you don't have stage fright is to prepare. And it's to prepare as solidly as possible. Remember, you're the person that's standing in front of the group. You've got the knowledge for them that they need, that they can take something out of your presentation. And this is where your research comes in. This is where your information gathering comes in. This is where your statistics and your quotes come in. One of the things to make certain is that if you use statistics, make sure that those statistics can be backed up with research, because you see all the statistics that you find on the internet and how many of those statistics are true. So if you're going to use a statistic, make sure that you do your research on that statistic. But the point I'm trying to make here is that when you get to your presentation, you are going to be so well prepared that you are now going to give a dynamic presentation. You are going to be so well prepared that they're going to feel the passion in your presentation. Don't rely heavily on your PowerPoint. Make sure that you're not monotone and you give good voice inflection. And make sure that when you give your presentation, think about it as a show. Think about it as a performance. You know, one of the things that I like to say is when I get up on stage to talk to people, it's act one, scene one, and action. Now people have paid to come and see me. Now people have paid me to come into their organizations, and I want to be able to give them their money's worth, that they're going to get some objectives, they're going to get a message, and they're going to be entertained and take some of that wisdom out of the presentation and they're able to use in their everyday practice. So ladies and gentlemen, very quickly, we've talked about the 5 most common presentation mistakes. And go ahead and listen to this presentation a couple times and take out those little pearls of wisdom that you're now able to polish your presentation. But the secret to giving a good presentation, of course, is your preparation. Remember that you're the visual aid, dress professionally. Make sure that your PowerPoint presentation, if you're using one, isn't overpowering. But you need to get in front of audiences. You know, there's a great expression that my friend and mentor John Maxwell uses, and he says, you know what? Speakers speak. Put yourself in a position that you can share your message. Put yourself in a position that you can gain as much experience as you can so you can develop your presentation skills. Those are going to be the secrets to ensure that when you stand in front of a group, you're able to make sure that you give the best presentation possible. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I want to thank you for joining us on the 2016 Ultimate Leadership Development Series. Ladies and gentlemen, I do want to share with you a couple of our other courses that we have. One is Servant Leadership, and it's a narrated PowerPoint that takes you through the components of servant leadership. Now, one of the things that you can do as well is you can buy the license to teach the Servant Leadership course. That, of course, comes with a PowerPoint. It comes with the instructor resource manual. It has tons of student questions and student activities, so you can take that presentation, bring it into your organization, and you can teach your folks about servant leadership. Another great course that we have is using leadership quotes to guide your career. It's a narrated PowerPoint presentation that you could watch, but you could also buy the license that you can teach that PowerPoint presentation as well. It comes with the instructor resource manual, again, student questions and student activities. If you're interested in any of those products, you can go to our website at www.chriscebollero.com, and it'll be on our products page. And one of the flagships that we have to our products page is Ultimate Leadership 10 Rules of Success. You can buy the PowerPoint presentation. It comes with a 125-page instructor resource manual and, of course, student questions and activities that you can teach this to your workforce, or you could use it as a source of income to people that want to learn about ultimate leadership. And that purchase does come with the license to teach the course. And again, you can find that at www.chriscebollero.com. at our products page. And go ahead and register for other free and other exciting leadership presentations. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us and allowing me to come along with you on your leadership development journey.
Chris is an internationally recognized leadership expert with close to 30 years of experience. Chris has a proven track record for developing award-winning organizations. He is an author, motivational speaker, leadership coach, and teacher. Chris is available for leadership development, motivational speaking and teaching, and group and individual coaching. Check out our website at www.chriscebollero.com and register for other free leadership presentations. Thank you for joining us.